Welcome to Assembly Calendar. I'm Ted Flint. With us today, Assemblyman Steve McLaughlin, who serves the 108th Assembly District, which includes the counties of Albany, Columbia, Rensselaer, and Greene. Not necessarily in that order, but nice to have you, Steve.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
As we record this program, I guess the budget hearings concluded this morning.
Yep.
So why don't you bring us up to date on the actual process? We're about 6 weeks away from the April 1st budget deadline as we tape this program.
Yeah, well, we went through the budget hearings right now. We sat in on as many of those as we can. It's hard to make all of them with all the different meetings that we have, committee meetings and session, everything else, but sat in on quite a number of them, got to ask some good questions of tax and finance, and my focus tends to be private sector focused, and what can we do to make New York more business friendly. So I had a lot of pointed questions about that, about how New York can become more business friendly, and do they ever give that a thought in their process down there at tax and finance, and try not to be so heavy handed with our business owners, try to make it as business friendly as we can. And really one of my questions was, have we ever talked about having a way to maybe give these business owners who are just making an honest mistake, they're not trying to do something wrong, they're just making a mistake, a way to sort of educate them and say, this is what you did wrong, and here's how not to do it again, but rather than come in and say, here's a fine. Yeah. We just saw that this week with a guy that runs Papa John's.
A pizza place right locally. It was $5,500 fine for not providing enough polo shirts?
Enough polo shirts, yeah. When I worked in a restaurant business, you wash your shirt. I think I had 2 or 3 of them, and you had to wash your shirt. But here in New York, we have rules and regulations for everything, and they have regulations about how many polo shirts you have to have. I had no idea that was the case, but we sure found out this past week when the poor guy got hit with $5,500. It's ridiculous. I mean, all he had to do was go to the man and say, you need to provide more shirts, and I'm sure he would have gladly done that. Yeah. Now he gets the fine, and he has to provide more shirts. So that's the typical example of why New York is rated number 49 or 50 on the list of business-friendly states. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the governor unveiled his budget proposal, preliminary budget proposal, a month or so ago, and we have that. We'll look at that and your response to it then and your response to it now.
Great.
Assemblyman Steve McLaughlin.
How does government spur private sector job creation in a down economy while limiting spending and maintaining fiscal discipline? The answer is creative public-private sector partnerships that leverage state resources and assets to generate billions of dollars in economic growth. It's easy to say, it's hard to do.
I thought the governor's presentation was very good in the fact that it limited the growth of state spending, calling for a variety of consolidation of state agencies to make the size and cost of state government smaller. Certainly a mandate relief and talking about the state capping the cost of Medicaid to counties over a 3-year period, although I prefer 1 year, but I'll take 3 years if we can't get the 1 year. Pension reform, which will limit the growth of pension costs of taxpayers in the future. I think this was a good blueprint for negotiations and discussions with the public and the legislature.
Yeah, I just spoke to the governor a minute ago as he was leaving the room, and I told him he did a good job. I liked a lot of what I heard. Certainly you could pick something apart all day long if you want to, but overall, I think the governor delivered a pretty good budget address right there, and a lot of it was Republican conservative ideals. Pension reform, teacher evaluations, the state taking over more of the Medicaid increases. So overall, I liked it. There's some things that you might have some differences of opinion with, but that's okay. Overall, I think he did a good job.
That kind of speaks to the governor's relationship with the Republican conference. I hear it's a pretty good one.
Pretty good. There's certainly going to be differences of opinion, but that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think the way we arrive at consensus is to hammer out those differences of opinion and say maybe our way is the better way, and he thinks his way is the better way. But overall, we've been getting along fairly well, and I think that's largely because he's taken a fiscally conservative approach to things. When he veers off to a liberal side of things, that's when we have problems with him. But overall, he's done a pretty good job, and as we've said a few times, he's a pretty good Republican governor. So,
well, he realizes there's just no money.
There's no money. Governor said that many times. He's a progressive who's broke. We wouldn't be broke if we didn't have so much progressive government in this state. That's the reality. If we hadn't spent so much money for year after year after year, we wouldn't be in this mess. But the reality is New York has spent far too much money for decade after decade. The governor didn't create this problem, and he's doing his best to dig his way out of it, as is the legislature. So I think both sides deserve some credit here for working together and realizing we have severe problems and we have to move this state forward.
Well, let's take a look at his State of the State message back in January and kind of a broad outline of where he wants to see the state head in 2012. And we'll come back with Assemblyman Steve McLaughlin.
We have just started tackling the problems that this state needs tackled. This agenda that we laid out today is an ambitious agenda. more ambitious than anything this government has done in decades and decades and decades. We can build the largest convention center in the country. We can rebuild Buffalo. We can transform the Jacob Javits site. We can build a whole new energy highway system. We have that capacity. It's who we are. It's where we come from.
Well, I think Governor Cuomo today reflected on the successes of 2011, and moving forward to 2012, the discussion is going to center around jobs, 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 which I certainly agree with. But certainly some of the ideas that the governor floated today, the key question is, where's the money going to come from?
About $25 billion in spending in there that I don't know where it's coming from because this state is dead broke. So I want to see where this money's going to come from. Infrastructure clearly needs to be rebuilt. We all agree with that. But we're saying we're going to do no new taxes, no new fees. I absolutely agree with that aspect of what the governor's talking about. But if that's the case, where's the $25 billion come from? So, you know, it was a good speech on some of the issues, talking about pension reform. The governor's spot on with that. Pension reform needs to be done for new hires. We honor our commitments to those that are in the system right now. But for all new hires, I think that the rules of the game have changed a little bit. We need to address that in order to move this state forward.
Okay, so it's been 2 months, roughly, since that address.
Right.
Now, do you have any idea where that 25 bill is coming from? Or?
Some, but not all. We haven't
Really?
seen the entire budget yet. And we're out of sequence there, and that's a good thing. I mean, the first thing we saw was the budget address, where he kind of laid out some more specifics. The first thing, this one right here, was the wish list. And that should be a little bit of more rhetorical stuff and kind of not pie in the sky, but more your dreams list, what you want to achieve. And that's all fine, but I came out of that address saying, where's this money come from? We're dead broke. When you see $1 billion for Buffalo, and then we start to ask questions and say, well, where's this money going? Well, it's not really $1 billion, it's $100 million, and we're going to rearrange tax credits. That's the stuff that I got uneasy about, because if there is no new money here, so we're just rearranging a different the money into different areas. And that becomes problematic, because if you're taking away tax credit, if you're giving tax credits to someone else is losing them potentially. So that's the stuff that I really always push for clarity on. Where's this money coming from? I'm not a fan of convention centers being built. They're white elephants. I said I hope the place down in Aqueduct is white, because it's going to be a white elephant. Now, if it's private sector money only, okay, if they're willing to put up $4 billion. But again, my question was, what's the quid pro quo? What are they getting? Nobody is dumb enough to put up $4 billion, and Genting sure as heck isn't. They're a very smart, sharp corporation. They're not putting up $4 billion just because. They're getting something, and I want to know what that something is. And I think it's what the people of New York want to know. What are they going to get out of this? So,
Is the governor tipped his hand as to what?
No, not yet, but he did say that they're going to build it with their own money, and then there's no guarantee that they're going to get the gambling. And then Genting said, well, hold on a second. Genting wants some guarantees on what they're going to get. So there's a lot of give and take going on, and we don't have complete clarity. But if they're willing to do it with private sector money, and we're not going to put taxpayer money at risk, then I can get my arms around that. And I'm, quite frankly, going to vote for the gambling amendment, even though I'm not a big fan of gambling. I believe, personally, that people should have the right to do what they want with their money. So it's more of a libertarian type approach. I'm not a big fan of it. I think that there's giant problems that can come along with it, but I do believe you should have the right to do what you want with your own money. So I'll be voting yes, but maybe reluctantly voting yes. It's not a panacea, that's for sure. When we do finally get gambling in the state, I hope that nobody believes that our problems are going to be solved, because they are not. If you look at states like Nevada, I mean, the gambling capital of the world, they still have problems. So
Sure. On the infrastructure part of that, now I read today where the Tappan Zee Bridge, that project, is going to possibly get some federal funds, $2 billion worth of federal funds.
yeah.
I'm hearing all kinds of crazy numbers. Is it still $5-6 billion or $9 billion now? Or
when did these projects ever come in as first advertised?
Well, they're cost overruns.
Yeah, they're saying $5 billion. So my own math would say, well, let's make that 10, and we'll see what happens. That's what I think ultimately is going to happen. It's not going to come in at $5 billion. If it does, great. That's still a heck of a lot of money to build a bridge. But I'd be happy if it only came in at $5 billion. But at the end of the day, when we're a year down the road from now, or 2 years down the road when this bridge is done, let's wait and see where it is. I doubt it'll be $5 billion.
Now, you came back in December with your colleagues, the budget bill in December, and it was basically to get some flood relief money. That was part of it.
It was a big part of it,
Yeah. And, well, I don't want to take any words out of your mouth. Let's look at what you had to say on the floor, because it hits the nail right on the head.
Sure.
And we'll come back, we'll comment further, and we'll close things out with Assemblyman Steve McLaughlin.
It's not much of a tax cut. The reduced manufacturing tax rate is going to affect, I don't know who. That's being picked and chosen by the Department of Tax and Finance. I'm not a fan of that at all, when every manufacturer in the state needs help. The reduced MTA payroll tax, it doesn't affect me quite as much. I understand why the downstate folks want it. I think that money's being spread out among the rest of the taxpayers because they're not facing a cut. We're just spreading that money out somewhere else. The Youth Works program, no impact on my district at all. We're virtually ignoring all the rural areas, which desperately need help. Those kids need jobs just as much as a kid in Queens or Brooklyn or Manhattan needs a job. My kids in Albany need a job. In Troy, they need jobs. In Rensselaer County, Albany, Saratoga, Greene, Columbia, they all need jobs. So that doesn't help us at all either. So for upstate New York, there's very little here. The property tax reassessment and the school district property tax installment payment plans, they're DOA. There isn't a district in this state that's going to take advantage of it. I've already talked to many of them. No interest in letting the taxpayers install their payments or reassess due to property damage because they desperately need the money. So those two are dead on arrival. Hurricane Irene really bothers me that as a state we were unprepared. I can deal with that. What I can't deal with is that we didn't come back in a session in October after the storm to address the problem then. We have let these people suffer for 3 to 4 months, homeless. At best, the FEMA trailers just started to arrive. Pete Lopez's district took it harder than anybody. He was up night and day trying to fix his district. But to not address that in a special session, really, really bad on our part. We should have been in here. We should have done our job back then. That, to me, really sticks in my craw, because I can guarantee you, if that storm had hit where they expected it to hit, which was in New York City, I guarantee you we would have been in here addressing storm damage. That much I can guarantee.
Well, that revs me up every time I see that.
That's one of my favorite comments I've ever made on the floor.
It was fantastic, and it hits the nail right on the head and everything.
Yeah.
When it happens to New York City, they act on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I was. You can see I was getting a little animated there toward the end, and that was a late night, the end of a pretty long day there. But you know, I think that needed to be said. We expected this storm to hit Manhattan. I guarantee if it had, we would have been in here, get that money out the door 3 or 4 days later. And to let these people hang the way they did and wait until that was what, late December sometime. Really ridiculous and uncalled for. We should have been in, and we should have gotten our job done.
Now, so it was the budget bill, and no new taxes, no new fees to pay for the close of budget deficit, almost.
Right.
That was the case. Now, we're facing the same scenario this session. Yeah. $3 billion this fiscal year.
Yeah, well, I would say there were new. You're talking about the one the so-called tax cut that we had that brought in
so-called tax cut,
$2 billion or so, but only in New York can you cut taxes and bring in $2 billion.
That's right.
You know, it was a revenue increase is what it was. I was one of very few no votes. There was 8 no votes on the floor, and I was one of them. And for those reasons right there that I spelled out. It didn't do much for upstate New York at all. I thought it was an insult to most middle-class taxpayers. People below 40 grand got no relief at all, so that bothered me. And also the fact that the middle class gets a pittance, $3 a week, but yet we get this shift of the MTA money throughout the entire budget. That's a problem. So it was a whole lot of nothing to me. It was one of those looks good kind of things. Aren't we great? We cut taxes. But to me it was a let them eat cake type of bill. Like, here's $3 a week. You're supposed to thank the legislature for that. That's not a tax cut.
Go get a haircut. We love you. Get out of here.
Yeah, but then we're going to see a bunch of fees and everything else start to creep up. That's more than going to eat up that. And it didn't do anything to address spending. Again, we don't address the real problem, which is out of control spending.
We have about 20 seconds. I just want to, this year, $3 billion budget deficit. Again, the governor says no new taxes. We heard that before, though.
Yep, been there, done that. We made it almost an entire year. But at the end of the year, in December, we had a special session and we brought the revenues up. Until this economy turns around, we're going to be faced with this problem. And until we have out of control spending, we're going to be faced with this problem. And they talk about Medicaid. I'm all for taking over Medicaid, but we're not addressing the out of control growth of Medicaid. The growth is projected to go up 4% this year. We've got to stop the runaway train.
We'll follow up on another show. Thanks for joining us, Assemblyman Steve McLaughlin. Thank you for joining us on Assembly Calendar. We'll see you soon. I'm Ted Flint.